All right, let's continue with our trigonometry section. So, just a quick review. If I want to solve for this missing side in this right triangle, the first thing I want to do is label the sides of the triangle. So with respect to this angle, this 11 would be the opposite side because it's not touching this angle. It's not one of the sides that makes up that angle. So this would be the opposite side. This x would be the adjacent side. Okay? The side with nothing would be the hypotenuse because it's on the opposite side from the right angle. So remember, if we're thinking so ka toa, the trig function that deals with opposite and adjacent is tangent. So my setup here is going to be tangent of the angle. Tangent of 39 equals opposite over adjacent. So 11 over x. To solve for x, I would multiply both sides by x first. That x will cancel out. We'll have x times the tangent of 39 equals 11. And then to get x by itself, I would just divide both sides by the tangent of 39. And that we can put into the calculator. So if we go to the calculator, remember, make sure you're in degree mode. So if you click on mode, degree should be highlighted. If it's not, use your arrow keys to get down there and press enter on it. So what were we doing? 11 divided by the tangent of 39. So 11 divided by tangent of 39 degrees gets me 13 point, and remember, rounding is important here. So if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, since the hundredths place is greater than 4, this would round up to 13.6. Okay, so in this video, what we're going to do is actually solve for angles. Right? The last lesson we solved for sides. In this one, we're going to solve for angles. So let's go through the steps here as we do an example. The steps are actually going to be almost identical to solving for a side. Okay? The first thing that we want to do for given something like this, where our angle is the unknown, we want to label the sides. So with respect to this angle that we want to find, this 15 would be the opposite side, because that's the side that's not part of this angle, it's not touching that angle. And the 24, since it's opposite the right angle, would be the hypotenuse. Right? So then, just like before, we want to choose the appropriate trig function based on these sides. So again, we're thinking about so ka toa. So the trig function that deals with the opposite and the hypotenuse is sine. So my setup is going to be sine of the angle. So sine of x equals opposite over hypotenuse, which is 15 over 24. So now this is where it gets a little bit different. My variable, my angle, is inside of the trig function. Okay? I need some way to get it out of the trig function. I need to undo sine. Well, to undo sine, right, we're thinking, if we're adding, we would subtract from both sides of the equation. If we're multiplying, we would divide, right? That's an inverse. We need to undo that operation. Well, that's what these little inverse things are up here in this little sentence. So what I want to do actually is take the inverse sine of both sides of the equation. Okay, I know this looks a little weird, okay, but what actually happens, I'm undoing sine. So the inverse sine of sine just cancels out, and all we're left with over here is x. So we get x equals the inverse sine of 15 over 24. Now, we can just type this into the calculator. So if you look on your calculator, right above sine, cosine, and tangent are the inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. So to get those, I'm going to hit the second button. So I'm going to do second sine, and then 15 over 24. That is the angle. Okay? So again, if I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, this would be 38.7, because I look at this value, and since it is 5 or greater, this number gets rounded up. So 38.7 degrees would be my answer here. Okay? So remember, when we're setting up the equation, it's always trig function of the angle equals whatever that ratio is. Now in this case, to solve for the angle, we need to use the inverse trig. So let's do a couple more examples. All right. On this one, again, first step, label the sides. So with respect to this angle, well, this would be the opposite side. So that means this would be the adjacent leg, and this would be the hypotenuse. So the trig function that deals with adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So my setup is going to be cosine of the angle of x equals adjacent over hypotenuse equals 8 over 11. So now, to get x by itself, I'm going to take the inverse cosine of both sides. So these cancel out, and we just get x equals inverse cosine of 8 over 11. All right, so let's put that in the calculator. Second cosine of 8 divided by 11, and we get 43.3. Since this number is less than 5, this will not get rounded up. So 43.3 degrees is the measure of this angle here. All right. Let's do one more example together of this. So again, first step, label the sides. So with respect to this angle, this 20 would be opposite. This blank side would be the hypotenuse, which means this would be adjacent. So if we're thinking so, ka, toa, that means that this is the, or I'm sorry, that means that I would use tangent. I'm using opposite and adjacent. So my setup will be tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent. So 20 over 37. And to get x by itself, I'm going to take the inverse tangent of both sides. And that we can put into the calculator. So inverse tangent of 20 over 37 gets me 28 point, now since this is 5 or greater, this will round up to 28.4. So that angle, 28.4 degrees. All right. Now I do want to go through maybe one or two more that are just slightly more complicated. Okay. So let's take a look at something like this. Okay. On this one, I've got two right triangles connected by a single side. They share a side. My ultimate goal is to find DE. Okay, I want to find this length right here. So if I look at the information that I'm given, if I'm just looking at this bottom right triangle, I don't have enough information to find DE. I'm going to have to do two things. I'm going to have to first find this side that the two triangles share, and then use that to find DE. Okay? So what we can do first, if I want to find FD, I can just ignore this bottom triangle and use trigonometry. Right? So we can say that, well, this is what I want to find first. I want to find this side. So with respect to this angle, let's label the sides. So this would be opposite, because it's not touching that angle. This would be adjacent. So the trig function I'm going to use is tangent. So we'll say the tangent of the angle of 61 degrees equals x over 24. So in this one, we're solving for a side. Okay, so this is like last week's problem. So to get x by itself, I'm just going to multiply both sides by 24. And we can put that into the calculator. 24 times the tangent of 61. 4 times tangent of 61 gets me 43.3 if I round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so now I know that FD is 43.3. Okay, so let's bring that full diagram back. You know, this side's 43.3. Now I can use that to find this side. Okay, so now let's say that we already used x, so let's call this y. Right? So now I'm ignoring the top triangle. So now with respect to this angle, this is opposite and this is adjacent. So opposite and adjacent is tangent. So my setup will be tangent of the angle. So tangent of 19 degrees equals opposite over adjacent. To solve for y, just multiply both sides by 43.3. Those cancel, and we can put this into the calculator. 43.3 times the tangent of 19. And we get 14.9. So the length of DE is 14.9. So on a problem like this, if we've got two right triangles that share a side, we're going to use two steps. The first step is to find the side that they share, and then use that in our other right triangle to find the other piece of information. Okay, let's do one more of those together. Let's look at this one. Okay, my ultimate goal is to find the measure of angle W. Okay, well, to do that, we first need to find this side that the two triangles share. I need to find xz. So I'm just ignoring this triangle first. I'm just looking at this triangle. So if I'm looking at, this is the side I want to find. Here's my angle. So with respect to this angle, 15 would be the opposite side. X would be my hypotenuse, because that's opposite the right angle. Okay, so the trig function that deals with opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So my setup would be sine of 25 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse equals 15 over x. So to solve for that, I'm going to need to multiply both sides by x first. So x times the sine of 25 equals 15. Then divide both sides by the sine of 25. And this we can put in the calculator. 15 divided by the sine of 25. We get 35.5 if we round to the nearest tenth. So we now know that the length of this side is 35.5. So I'm going to erase my x here. We can say that this is 35.5. So now I want to ignore the bottom triangle and just look at this triangle. My goal now is to find the measure of angle W. So I'm going to erase all the marks I had. We just used that to find the length of this side. So now, if I want to find angle W, with respect to angle W, 35.5 is the opposite side. And again, we're just looking at this right triangle here now. Then this side, the 22, would be adjacent, because the blank side would be the hypotenuse. So now, to find this angle, if I'm dealing with opposite and adjacent, so ka-toa, opposite and adjacent, would be tangent. So I'm going to say the tangent of angle W is equal to opposite over adjacent. So to get W by itself, we're going to take the inverse tangent of both sides. These cancel out. We just get W equals the inverse tangent of 35.5 over 22. And we can put that into the calculator. So inverse tangent of 35.5 divided by 22. We get that that angle would be 58.2 degrees. Okay, so there is an edge elastic up for tomorrow's assignment, but remember for this, upload a picture of your notes to Schoology. Okay. As always, send me any questions that you have. And the edge elastic will have some problems where you're finding missing angles, some where you're finding missing sides, and then some like this where you have to do two things. Find the side that the two triangles share, and then use that to find the other piece of information in this triangle. Okay? Please send me any questions.